we'll start off by talking about what we mean by competition tapering.
Oh, tapering. Is, I guess, a general term that's kind of a leftover from periodization. The idea being is a explicit attempt to rest and recover to maximize performance. It's sort of a realization phase in block periodization. The goal basically is to be able to demonstrate all of your hard-earned gains at the right time. It's acknowledging that whatever date you're tapering for is not just another day at the gym, but an important date where you want to perform the best you possibly can.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 That's good.
That was pretty good.
It was.
So you brought up a myriad of sub-questions like nutrition, other activities, and other things like that. I think before we dive into the nitty-gritty of what tapering really entails practically, specific to strongman competition, let's go over the others. Like, yeah. So the first one that stuck out was the nutrition thing. Like, what do I eat? And I guess that's pretty specific to whether or not you're trying to make weight.
Yeah. If you are trying to make weight, you don't eat much. It really depends on your making weight strategy, where you are, where you need to be, your body fat percentage, total mass, all of that stuff.
And that's a lot of those things, like when you're not eating, I mean, that's another stress. It's something to consider in your sort of recovery process. That might slow down the process of tapering, or might have a dampening effect on your sort of realizing your fitness gains if you're starving the week before you're supposed to demonstrate said gains. On the flip side, if you are either well under the limits of your weight class or you're a super heavyweight, you're not thinking about those things at all. So you're at liberty to really pursue nutrition explicitly to sort of prepare yourself for competition. A lot of people have different rituals when it comes to that.
Yes.
I would say one of the most important things is probably gastrointestinal distress and glycogen loading or depletion. So if you're free to eat what you want, all the time, then it's pretty easy to keep your glycogen levels pretty high. You don't have to change when you're eating. But if you're making weight, it probably entails a lot of manipulations of hydration. Maybe carbohydrate intake, maybe creatine consumption, all these kind of other stuff that might be a regular part of your training. All of a sudden, you're restricting yourself. So if you have a night before weigh-in, which is the best possible scenario, you still only have a 12-hour window to fix all the things that you fucked up. Starving yourself,
6 days of fucking up,
dehydrating yourself, and that could be, again, that's another big stressor. I think that's obviously a topic for another video, but it's something that needs to be considered in your tapering process. How stressful are the other things that you're going to prepare, like traveling, I don't know, ditching all your responsibilities for the weekend to go do something else, and then the whole hydration, nutrition stuff. That's nice.
If you are doing your first show, there's no reason to make weight, so don't. You don't need the additional stressor at all.
I'm assuming, based on what we're trying to do here, that we're talking to mostly novice female competitors. And the truth is, unless you're doing maybe like a ladies lift year show, they're not going to have enough girls in your class, and you're not even going to compete in your own weight class anyways. Just fucking forget that.
Yeah.
Don't kill yourself trying to be under 140 or under 180, because it's probably not going to matter. What's really going to matter is that you feel good and you're there to like learn and have fun. As you advance beyond that stage, then you'll learn whether or not you can expect women to be in your weight class, and whether or not they'll be able to division. But the reality of the sport, as it is today, it's very uncommon for you to just get a full class of all the girls that are in your division. If you're a master, forget about it. If you're a lightweight or a heavyweight, it can often be like there's all of one and none of the other kind of thing. The grass is always greener at every show. So yeah, Gabby's absolutely right. Do not kill yourself. Worry about making weight.
Just eat normally. Competition week, competition day. Kind of like everything else, nothing new on competition day. You're gonna eat certain things on competition day. Try them out before you train on every other day. The last thing you want is to feel like you're going to puke all over the place when you're doing heavy yoke or something.
Or shit your pants.
Or shit your pants. I mean, that's really not a cute thing ever.
Yeah, and if you haven't done a show yet, you'll find out that usually the bathroom facilities at most strongman shows are really terrible.
Yeah.
So you want to probably limit the number of trips you have to make to the bathroom.
Yeah. So nothing new. Just do what you normally do. There's no special protocol needed except maybe if you want to eat some extra carbs, that is encouraged. Carbs are always encouraged. But again, don't necessarily go and like house a burger and fries and egg for a show if that's not something that you eat regularly. So kind of resist that urge to just gorge on stuff you never eat.
Well-trodden, complex carbs, many hours to digest.
Yes.
A great place to start. And the rest of it's probably just tweaks.
Yep.
All right.
Nutrition
So
stuff.
other activities where it's like, should I be doing cardio, going to yoga, blah blah. We've refined our sort of week or two out sort of system to come down to maybe 1 or 2 last training days that are scheduled a specific distance from the contest, and then massages, chiropractic adjustments,
bodywork,
fascial stretching therapy.
Yeah.
Like that's the other activities we're doing. If you want to go to a yoga class, more power to you. We'll discuss the specifics in a moment of just the varying sort of physical qualities that are going to be contested in your show. And the truth is like, there's going to be a little overlap between yoga and some of your energy system training that may or may not be like what you want to be doing while you're tapering. Right. Likewise with any other physical activity. I think if you don't have 20 or 30 minutes to listen to us ramble, the short version of this is you should taper. If you're a novice female lifter, this is like your first show, it's probably like 3 or 4 days off or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's probably more than a lot of other girls are taking. And it's plenty of time to recover for the most part, and you're gonna have a much better time just having a few days of rest before your show.
Right. You're not gonna magically get better or up your yoke by 50 pounds in 3 days.
If you're still struggling with an event, Friday before the show is not the time to be working on it.
Yeah.
And I know that hopefully for most of you guys that's a funny joke, but the truth is like every show we go to, we talk to folks that are like, yeah, I was really working on this yesterday because I want to get it. It's like, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about other activities to do, really they should be recovery oriented. There may be a time and a place for like low intensity cardiovascular training that might be very helpful for recovery. But that would be a very specific protocol. Going to a body pump class Thursday or Friday night that's not what we're talking about.
It should be all about sort of chilling out, foam rolling, mobilizing anything you do. I usually do at least 1 chiropractic session, if not 2, and some sort of massage. If I'm doing like an intensive sports massage, it's really early in the week, like on Monday or Tuesday at the very latest. I'm doing more of like a relaxation, sort of like spa massage, then it can be a little bit closer because they're not making me cry by sticking their elbow into my lats. But those are sort of my taper activities. Other than that, it's mostly just trying to recover from all the fatigue and get ready for the Saturday.
What was the other stuff? Is there other stuff?
The other stuff? I don't think there was.
Okay.
I think that was the other stuff.
Okay, so those of y'all who have no patience, you're done.
You're good.
Take 3 days off and really take them off. If you can afford to eat. Get a great night's sleep the night before the show. Do everything you can to not be nervous.
Yeah. And you're going to be, and that's okay.
Reread the rule book.
Like
right?
7 times.
If it's your first show, don't miss reps because you're not waiting for a down command or whatever else stupid stuff that you do because you're a noob.
Yeah.
All right. Now, for the rest of you who want to understand what we're talking about in more depth, we have some cute charts and graphs we'll look out in a second, and we'll talk about the philosophy behind making tapering choices and how to best prepare for a competition. So, I'm gonna grab the board.
Okay.
And let's put it on top of the fire.
Okay.
And that way everybody can see the whole thing. And can you hold it up for a second?
Yeah.
Turn it that way, like 10 degrees. Other way. Let's see how it looks on the camera. It just looks like a big white board. Can you lean it forward towards us? Can you lean it backwards away from us? Yeah, it's just completely illegible. All right.
Oh, good. So here's what we'll do. We will take a picture of this and maybe insert it into this part of the video so you can see what we're talking about and go back and reference it when you need it. Or we can try and make this work.
I think it's mostly a glare thing from over here.
Yeah.
But, so speaking of which, maybe, which one's less glaring, down or up? I don't know.
No.
All right. I think it's somewhat visible, and if so, like, then great. If not, then like Gabby said, we'll add a still photograph of this, and we'll superimpose it somewhere with our voices mysteriously
coming out of nowhere.
But how about over on the left-hand side, we have a visual representation of the classic model of sort of adaptation and training, known as supercompensation. And I think Gabby will explain this while I Vanna White the imagery here.
Yeah.
So, Gabby, supercompensation?
So our top graph here is...
Hey, Vanna White.
Oh, sorry. You point.
Our top graph
is demonstrating just sort of your homeostasis line. Or homeostasis meaning nothing changes.
This is you sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Right.
And like eating iron carbs and stuff on your recovery days. And the bottom graph demonstrates the supercompensation model. So what we are basically saying here is that here is our little homeostasis point, and then you are going to go and train and exhaust your systems. Right? You're going to just curl until you can't curl no more. And then what happens is after your imposed training demand, you are going to specifically adapt and begin to recover, and your level of fitness is going to rise above what it was before. This is basically just going to repeat and continue to move along in a upward movement.
Yeah. I think we were a little askew when we drew the graph, but it should clearly look like a line that trends or slopes up. Right? So that's the prevailing model, and or was, and it's very adept at describing some of the mechanical changes, morphological changes that happen to the body as a result of things like strength training and cardiovascular training. Gabby, you get to Vanna White with the fitness fatigue model here. That's not really very clearly visible, even if you're not on YouTube.
Like I can barely see.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have to talk you through this.
Yes.
But the fitness fatigue model has kind of taken primacy away from supercompensation in a lot of the newer, cooler kids literature. And I do understand why from a athletics perspective. It better describes what's happening as an organism when you endure a training stress. Right? The basic concept behind the fitness fatigue model is that at the point of induction of any kind of stress, you have an immediate fatigue and an immediate change in fitness as a result. So basically one training session immediately results in an improved fitness. However, the fatigue that results is equal to or greater than the fitness improvement at first. And if you can see the slope of the two lines, the fatigue has a more severe slope that ends in a shorter period of time, whereas the fitness slope is a shallower slope that takes a longer period of time. So essentially the dashed line that runs through the middle would be a way of describing your performance at any given sort of time point along this process. So upon training, while theoretically your fitness improves immediately, you're not able to demonstrate that improved fitness until you've had time to reduce your fatigue. Right? And once fatigue has gone away enough to sort of unmask your improved fitness, that's when your performance breaks above the old homeostasis line into an improved place. Now, this describes things very well when it comes to more complex aspects of fitness, especially things like motor learning, CNS activity, efficiency, and those types of things. But it's also a model that can describe every physiological process that goes on. And I think that this is a generic picture, but basically each sort of physical capacity that we can discuss has its own timeline for this. With a training stimulus for one physical attribute might have a shorter fatigue period or a longer fatigue period, as well as a shorter or longer fitness period. Now, I think this would be a good place to take a break because I have to open the doors to the gym to let all the people in. So, I'll be right back.
Think about all of this.
Yeah, think about all of that. We'll put the different parts of the room. All right.
So we're back.
We're back.
Thought about all those wonderful, wonderful things.
Yeah, I hope you did. All right, so essentially what we're saying here is we're gonna use the fitness fatigue model to kind of describe the not the morphological changes, but like the changes in readiness, preparedness, or performance as you adapt to the stresses of basically like your last training session, whenever that may be. Throwing out just a generic number, like, you know, take 1 week off is okay. I mean, if you haven't thought of it before and like you've never considered taking some time off before competing, then, you know, doing anything would be an improvement. But what we're trying to present here is a little bit more background information to help you understand why there are certain things that you should probably stop doing sooner and other things that you can stop doing later. As far as basic sort of fitness attributes that we can kind of lump into sort of training categories, we came up with 4 main ones that we thought would best describe most of what's being contested during a strongman contest. And they are?
They are our 1 rep max force, right? Something like a max deadlift event. We basically got like speed and explosiveness in the middle, alactic energy systems, and then lactic energy systems.
And obviously this isn't exhaustive. There are other things going on. But I would say that 90% plus of your results are probably going to come down to your capacity and development in these 4 domains when it comes to strongman. So, written in very fine font below them are kind of an estimated duration of the resilience of that attribute. So essentially, how long after your last training session does this attribute remain at its sort of like highest train level? And likewise, how soon is too soon to retrain it, or how soon is too soon before like one must compete? So down here on the left side of the continuum, like Gabby said, 1 rep max force production. Best example is usually, you know, like a deadlift for max.
Yeah.
Maybe even a clean and press for max sometimes can do that. Occasionally something like a heavy load, like a stone or a keg for max, could fall into that domain mostly. But I think that, like, let's use an example of just a very generic show. There's about 5 events. There's going to be a clean and press event. There's going to be a deadlift event. There's going to be 1 or 2 sort of carrying or moving events, and there's going to be maybe like a loading event. The first 2 that I mentioned, the sort of deadlifting and cleaning and pressing kind of stuff, they're either for reps or they're for max. And if they're for max, then we're definitely talking about 1 rep max force. If they're for reps, 1 rep max force remains very important, especially if it's relatively heavy for you. But, you know, the other attributes might be important as well. But let's use a specific example. In the 1 rep max force range, we've got a little note here that says 5 to 15 days. what we're saying is less than 5 days rest is probably insufficient rest to have you be as prepared as possible on competition day. So if you're training for a 1 rep max deadlift event, you need to stop deadlifting heavy at least 5 days before the show, and maybe as many as 15. And the source of this range would basically come down to the absolute development of this capacity. So let's say, for instance, like just how great of a deadlifter you really are. If you are fucking elite, then you're going to be closer to the 15. If you're a relatively new deadlifter who doesn't perform like that high compared to their genetic potential, then you're probably closer to the 5. If you are a novice female preparing for her first or second show, you're probably closer to the 5 than you are to the 15. Nevertheless, you know, the midway point of this is like 10 days. It's like a week, week and a half of like not deadlifting heavy. That's probably something that no one's told you to do yet. But honestly, yeah, you probably want to chill out on the really hard, really heavy stuff. And like Gabby joked before, it's like if you're not there yet, you're not going to get there like Thursday or Friday before the show. And rest becomes much more valuable than one more practice session. Yes. On the force, velocity, acceleration kind of curve here, we're talking about speed and power stuff. Clean and press events, whether it's for max or for reps, probably fall a little bit more closer to here. Lots of other things that strongmen do incorporate this fitness capacity. So I think loading events where they're not super heavy but they might be high, or you know, speed is incredibly important as far as like finish time. That goes up there. What else? Throwing something?
Yeah.
Like keg tossing or something? Yeah.
Definitely.
That would be very much a force velocity or acceleration thing. This is CNS intensive and thusly takes a long time to develop and also takes a long time to dissipate. However, most people who train these exercises don't train them as heavy. I think it's pretty intuitive that if you want to throw a keg, you know, very far, you know, you have to throw a light keg. And so, you know, people don't tend to overtrain this as much as they might do with the 1 rep max force development. Nevertheless, it takes a while to build up, it takes a while to dissipate. You're pretty safe, you know, discontinuing your speed and high velocity stuff as little as 3 days out, or as much as maybe 10 days out. Again, if you're like you know, going to do an axle clean and jerk for max or whatever, and you know, you're a lightweight woman going for 200, you're going to need 10 days, right?
Definitely.
If you're doing 100 for reps, you can probably stop 3 or 4 days out maybe. And again, if it's a lightweight for high reps, you might even consider moving that event over into another domain, like, you know, lactic energy system development or alactic energy system development. So, moving right along, alactic energy system development. Alactic energy system development basically describes work capacity where your lactic energy system is not elicited. So it's short enough to where you don't feel the burn. Right? A good example would be really just any set that ends in failure before you get to enough reps or enough time to maybe get to the 20, 30 second mark. So most of our strength work, you know, doing sets of 8 or less relatively quickly, that's usually alactic energy system development. Now, most strongman events are as many reps as possible in 60 seconds. So you might be inclined to think, well, oh, you know, the lactic system must be very important as well, and it is. But if the weights are heavy enough, you find that like just because someone is filling 60 seconds of activity, you know, if they're only getting 5 or 6 reps, that's probably still not that lactic. That's probably a little bit more alactic energy system development oriented. Now, alactic energy system development is kind of a combination of biochemical adaptations, like how much creatine or ATP you're storing in your muscles, but it's also very morphological. How big are your muscles? What percentage of your muscle fibers are fast twitch versus slow twitch, and other things like that. And that's why there's a pretty wide range from 2 to 7 days. So a highly developed alactic energy system development athlete who has taxed his alactic system probably needs as much as a week off to fully recover. A less experienced athlete or one who hasn't trained as rigorously might only need 2 or 3 days. Again, the midpoint there is what, 5 days? Yeah. like 5 days. So the final one down here, lactic energy system development. We've actually, I know that's illegible. It says 36 to 96 hours. The truth is, someone whose energy systems aren't very well developed, who isn't very like glycolytically fit, could probably tolerate a glycolytic energy system development oriented training session as little as 2 days out from the contest, and honestly have a positive impact on performance. But most of us, probably 3-4 days is far enough out. If you're anticipating a contest that's going to require lactate capacity, and what would be some examples of events that are very lactate dominant?
I mean, if you're going to go anything over 30 seconds where you are working the entire time, so not like
medleys.
Yeah, like any medley, like a sled drag medley.
Sled drag especially.
Yes, sled drag is firmly in the lactic region.
If you have a medley that ends with a hand-over-hand pull or a sled drag or a truck pull or something like that, it's just constant work, and you're already fatigued, I guarantee you, you are going to be in the lactic energy system zone.
You will know.
Yeah. And so, like, you know, finishing a medley with a sled drag, anybody who's done it knows the burn and the pump that you get in your quads.
Yeah.
That energy system development does not take long to improve. A couple of training sessions over a few days, and immediately you start to see improvements. Likewise, it does not take that long to dissipate. So if you've got a sled drag for like max distance in your show, and you stop training your lactate system 2 weeks out, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're gonna get less fit with all that time off. Now, I think this should be a good balance here. We told you, like, hey, if no one ever told you to take a week off, take a week off, it's gonna be great. We're also telling you that there are certain fitness capacities that you take, you know, more than 4 or 5 days off, they're probably gonna start to decline a little bit. And that's why there's no easy answer. There's no like, yes, stop them this day. I think the better answer would be looking at the individual components of the events you plan to compete in, where your relative fitness level is, where your strong and weak points are, and the actual nature of the events. And there might be some things that you discontinue, you know, 10 days out, whereas there might be a couple of things that you want to squeeze in. Most contests are on Saturdays. So let's say you do have a sled drag on Saturday. You might have your last sled drag training session on like maybe Wednesday or Thursday if you're really pushing it, and that might actually be beneficial.
That doesn't mean maxing out your sled drag though.
No, it means like doing the sort of minimal amount of work required to maintain your lactate energy system development fitness, which is often a lot less than people think.
Get in some heavy breathing.
Yeah. All that is required is some moderately heavy breathing for short periods of time with some rest. So, going back to our sort of generic contest prep, you've got an axle clean and press for reps, and you know that's the very first event of the day. And you know, for you, it's a little heavy, and then you know you don't want to necessarily do 1 rep max oriented work. You know, you're not hitting singles at 80 or 90%, or you know, if the contest weight is super heavy for you, you're not trying to hit the contest weight over and over again, and you're focused more. Weird. And you're focused more on maybe a little bit of speed, a little bit of alactic work. So for instance, you know, a good example of, you know, axle clean and press alactic work might be hitting something, you know, that's 70% of max, you know, for a rep or two, and then resting long enough before hitting it again so that you're not accumulating hydrogen ions. Right? You're not, you know, going lactic. You know, if you rest like 30 seconds or less, and you do it like 10 or 20 times in a row, yes, you're going to turn what should be, you know, force velocity work into lactic work really quickly. Yeah. You just got to make sure you have enough recovery time where that lactate doesn't accumulate and doesn't change the nature of the training session. You know, then you've got the deadlift to think about. The truth is the deadlift, like it's a 1 rep max event, it's out here. And if you're a decent deadlifter, you know, you're probably doing your last deadlift like Wednesday or Friday the week before, giving yourself 10 to 8 days of like no deadlifting. And if there's any exception to that rule, it might be like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the week before, you do some light, easy deadlifts, you know, and like they really have to be like light and easy. They can't really fatigue the sort of 1 rep max system.
Yeah, don't think that 90% is light and easy.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not.
All right, so, you know, and then you've got your moving stuff. Let's say you've got a yoke. If the yoke is really heavy, then there is some 1 rep max force consideration. You know, if you have a hard time picking it, or, you know, taking your first few steps, then like a lot of your training for the yoke is going to be oriented in this energy system, and it's going to stay there. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully your yoke is light enough to where you can pick it easily, and then you can move quickly with it. In which case, if it's a typical distance, like 60 feet, it's probably all alactic. You know, and you can do your last yoke session maybe as short as like, you know, 2, 3, 4 days out. If it's really heavy, it's really hard, but you're really good, you know, that might be more like 5, 6, 7 days out. But you could still probably be training that moving event, you know, the week of the contest and have it improve your preparedness rather than impede it.
As long as you're not crushing your soul again.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, for folks that are good at the yoke can get so heavy that it's very CNS intensive no matter what you're doing, what percentage. It's like if you're, you know, I just throw numbers out, like a lightweight woman, like a contest yoke is like 300, 350.
Well, I'll let you. 400 is like
400? Okay. And like,
400.
and you can do 500, like, just because you can do 500, 400 is still 80%. It's still pretty heavy. And it's still 400 fucking pounds on your spine. Right? That has a training effect, and it takes time to recover from, no matter what you think it is relative to your max or the contest, what have you. Okay? You got to put the big picture in there too. Farmer's walk.
Yeah.
Let's say the farmer's walk is like, it has a turn in it or something like that, so it's a little longer. Maybe it's a little bit alactic, maybe it's a little bit lactic. Again, you know, as long as you're not hurting your hands, you could probably afford to squeeze in that farmer's walk practice like on Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know, maybe even Wednesday. If it's not that heavy, you're not that good at it, you're a major novice, you can probably train very close to the contest date.
You're light, fast, long.
What did we say the final of that was? Stones?
Stones.
Alright, so like if it's a stone series, you know, which is kind of the classic sort of setup of the Casimir rule. In the Casimir rule, you know, you go from lightest to heaviest, and they go from highest to lowest in the platforms. That's a very generic kind of setup. How that is for you, training effect, probably depends on how heavy the stones are, especially like the final couple. So let's say that you've got a stone series coming up wherein the final stone is like your 1 rep max. Well then, mostly your training is probably in a little bit of the alactic, going through those lighter ones, a lot of force velocity, the lighter to higher platforms, and then the last 1 or 2 are probably more 1RM oriented. So you should know by now, like the deadlift, you're not picking that heavy ass motherfucking stone like a couple of days out from the show. The last time that you pick up that 1 rep max stone is probably like 10 days out, give or take a couple of days.
Yeah.
Now, if the series is more, you know, it's like the last stone is like 80 or 90% of your max, it's more about speed, well then you're talking, maybe there's some force velocity for sure, maybe there's some alactic, and then, you know, that whole, like last time you trained stones can move a little closer to the contest, like on average 4 or 5, 6 days away. So maybe on Monday, you know, before the Saturday show, maybe like last Friday or Saturday, like 1 week out, is the last time you trained that. On the flip side, let's say your final stones event is
Stone over bar for reps, 60 seconds.
And let's say it's a light stone and it's a low bar. You just gotta keep fucking moving over and over and over.
It's fascinating.
Maybe force velocity is important, but the truth is this is gonna be a lactic event. If you got a front squat, that moderate weight, like over and over and over again, you gotta get 10 or 12 reps in 60 seconds, you're gonna start to feel the burn. And as such, if that's a really low percentage of your 1 rep max, you don't have to think about it that way. You can think about it more as a lactic energy system development kind of thing, in which case, you know, if that's a weak point, you want to get another practice session in Tuesday, Wednesday, you can probably still do that shit. Yeah. Again, make sure you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Don't scrape up your shins, don't bruise up your arms, don't tear up your skin on your forearms. But, you know, you could probably get away with that.
Okay.
All right. So those are some concrete, practical examples of how, you know, the sort of fitness fatigue model addresses different physical attributes that are going to be contested in a single day in a strongman contest, and how to kind of be a little bit more specific about your tapering.
And there are a couple like consistent themes that kept going back to. One is like, don't kill yourself right before your taper or during your taper, right? You are not. No.
Okay.
But no. You are not going to like magically add, 50 pounds to your yoke on a Tuesday for your Saturday contest. So don't do that. Keep it light and easy. Again, it is a taper. You should just kind of be moving to keep loose, keep those fitness qualities that deteriorate quickly. And then kind of what we talked about earlier, like just chill the fuck out. It's okay. You're going to be okay if you take 3 days off of training. I promise you will live and you will be better for it in most cases.
So let's take a leap out there. If we're talking to novice women strongman competitors, there's probably a good chance we're talking to some CrossFitters, some rehabilitated CrossFitters, or maybe even folks that have come from another line of training. Yeah, bodybuilding. It's just being a fitness enthusiast. Most of those backgrounds would disincline you from wrestling.
Yes.
And as I mentioned before, I mean, if you're talking about lactate, energy system development, you can lose lactate fitness in as little as 96 hours. So if you're a CrossFit competitor, you can't afford to take a week off before an event. I mean, you're going to get worse at CrossFit when you take 7 days off. That's what it is. But this is not CrossFit. And so as the details change, so do the specifics. As the competition changes, so do the specifics of like how to approach it. The best thing that you can do for yourself is get help planning all this out. I feel like that's a recurring theme in every single video that we have. At some point or another, we say get a coach. And I know that's kind of shitty advice sometimes, because frankly, there may not be anyone that you can work with, like face to face, that may be really qualified.
There are some really, really good quality like online coaching groups. I know Kale Beck and Dreadnought Strength Briggs run a coaching group together, and he offers both of them independently offer online coaching, and that may be like an option if you are sort of sufficient enough in some technical things where you don't need somebody on you. But if we're talking to mostly novice athletes, having FaceTime is important.
Yeah.
It's a really important thing that even if we've mentioned this before, even if you're driving to a gym that's like an hour away once a week just to get some FaceTime to have a coach critique you, it's well worth your time.
You should definitely explore, like if you do have a specific contest that you're signed up for, it's becoming more and more common for the host gyms or other gyms in the area to offer training days, particularly on the weekends, to allow you to come in the facility and oftentimes use the exact equipment that's going to be in the contest. And there's, usually it's educationally oriented, so there's a coach there like teaching the implements. If that's the only thing you get at, take it.
It'll much better than anybody who hasn't had that.
And again, if you're talking about your first show, you're talking about novice division, you will usually compete against someone who's just never done any of this stuff before. And kudos to them for kind of having the balls to do that. But it's certainly not an ideal situation.
Right. It does help a lot with nerves too. Like you're very nervous for your first show.
Yeah.
Going in at least knowing a couple people that you're competing with, knowing what the equipment is like, getting to lay at the gym, all of that stuff can really put your nerves at ease when it comes to contest days. You don't have to worry about all of that so much. Fantastic. Wonderful.
Alright, we left anything out?
I don't think so.
No, this is the most comprehensive video that's ever been made before.
Ever.
About...
we had graphs. We had a white graphs.
Yeah, it wasn't just a graph.
There were multiple graphs.
Graphs plural. So I guess that's a good stopping point.
Yeah.
All right. I hope you guys taper now.
Yeah, go taper. Get carbs.
Eat carbs.
Get a carb rest.
Oh my god. All right. See you next week.
Next week? Yeah.